Darkness shrouded the horizon, a dense, impenetrable cloak stretching across every point of the compass. No stars guided the course, and no friendly beam of moonlight pierced the sky. The cold, briny wind carried only the echoes of distant thunder and the taste of storms yet to be born. Here, in the middle of this unforgiving abyss, a lone Viking longship drifted. At the ship's prow stood a figure with broad shoulders, his ragged cloak snapping in the wind. His name was Hakon, once a proud warrior, now a captain with a curse etched into his bones. He clutched the ship's worn cordage, straining to spot any glimmer of land. All he ever saw was night. It had become their nearly forgotten companion. No sunrise had graced them in what felt like centuries. There was a time he and his men sailed beneath the bright sun, laughing and shouting as they rode the wild waves toward their next conquest. They had been raiders once, fierce and free. Their sleek warship cut across the seas, prow carving furrows in the water. Storms that would have frightened lesser sailors only exhilarated them. Their swords tasted the spoils of distant shores, collecting gold, jewels, and slaves. They thought themselves invincible, chosen by the gods to inherit the earth from whomever they could wrest it away. But it all changed after that last raid. Hakon still heard the shrill cry of the woman in the village they'd ravaged. She had not run from them as the others did. Instead, she had stood firm in the village's makeshift temple, eyes narrowed in righteous fury. Her hair, though streaked with age, caught the flicker of the flames as their torches devoured the hut's wooden walls. Beside her lay a stone altar bearing symbols none of them recognized. Some foreign goddess, or perhaps a malevolent spirit. The woman had raised her hands to the sky, chanting words in a language unknown to their ears. Hakon, unsettled by the elemental force in her voice, had tried to silence her, sending one of his men to restrain her. But as Durand, a man known for his brutish strength, reached her, a sudden gale roared through the burning doorframe. The wind extinguished the flames within a blink, plunging all inside into darkness. When Hakon's vision returned, the woman disappeared, leaving the raging storm of her curse imprinted in the swirling embers. Hours later, as the Viking warband celebrated their plunder aboard the ship, they noticed the night would not yield to dawn. Time pressed on, but the horizon remained black, and the world never brightened. Though they tried to navigate home, their route twisted into a labyrinth of rough seas and swirling clouds that spat hail and cold rain. No matter which direction they turned, all they found before them was an endless curtain of night. Rumors spread of a curse binding them to perpetual darkness. But the men scoffed at first. They were warriors, fearless in the face of mortal foes, ignorant of any gods but those they extolled in their own sagas. Days passed. Weeks. The men froze in place as each new morning brought no sun. They fought the rolling ocean, delirium creeping into their dreams. They tried to console themselves with mead and shared stories, yet conversation inevitably shifted to the forlorn question, would the sun ever rise again? And so they became wanderers on the endless sea, drifting in silence. Their swords dulled with disuse, their gold useless, and their spirits frayed with each black-skied day. Hakon led them out of repeated storms, leveraging every bit of knowledge gleaned from a lifetime at sea. Yet the old optimism in his voice slowly drained, replaced by stoic resolve. The men needed someone to believe in, even if it was an illusion that one day they would find safe harbor. On a forlorn midnight, though every hour was a midnight on these seas. Hakon gathered his men around a small, flickering lantern in the ship's center. He looked upon their gaunt faces, each a mask of hunger, doubt, and unspoken terror. There were Sigurd and Bjorn, the rowers, their arms thick as oaks, now trembling from exhaustion. Ingrid, the lone shield maiden among them, sat with a half-snarled expression that betrayed a desperation she seldom permitted herself to show. Others crouched close, huddled in the meager warmth of shared presence. Hakon inhaled deeply. "My brothers." "And sister," he said, shifting respectfully toward Ingrid, who had proven herself in countless battles. "Any illusions we had about this darkness being a mere passing storm must be put to rest. Something binds us here, and we must break free." Ingrid raised her chin. "We have tried pointing the bow in every direction. Each night reveals fresh emptiness." Sigurd interjected, voice worn with fatigue. "Every star chart we once knew is meaningless. The heavens are devoid of the gods' usual patterns." Hakon laid a hand on his chest, as if to still the frantic pounding of his heart. "Before we departed that last village, you remember the woman? She was chanting a curse. Even as we spilt blood, her words hammered at the sky." He closed his eyes. "We must find her or the source of that power. Only that can break this torment." A murmur of agreement ran through the circle, though it was threaded with the hopeless sighs of men who could scarcely picture how they might return to that sundered place. They had no bearings, no sense of direction in a world devoured by night. "We search," Hakon decreed, "for answers, for hope, for freedom. We have no other choice." On that vow, they set to work with renewed determination. For days more, days measured only by the slow refilling and emptying of the water casks, they hunted any sign, a bird, a drift of seaweed indicating land, a swirl in the current that might guide them. They rowed when the wind betrayed them. They hoisted the sail when the breezes swept in. Always the black night pressed in around them. Their eyes burned from unbroken darkness. Their hearts sank with each worthless vigil. Still they pressed on. One night, though, night had become meaningless. An uncanny glow shimmered across the waters. It was faint, wavering like distant torchlight upon black waves. Ingrid, awake at the helm, thought at first it was her imagination, but it grew stronger, beckoning them through the gloom. She roused the others, and with hearts pounding, they set the longship on a new course toward that faint glimmer. As they drew nearer, the glow resolved into the shape of a lone stone tower perched on a rocky outcrop. The tower rose from the sea like a jagged tooth, sea spray lashing its base. A ghostly greenish light pulsed at the tower's peak, glimmering like a beacon of witchfire. The men peered upward in wary excitement. Could this place hold the key to their release? They lowered the sail in the roiling waters, guiding the ship cautiously into a small cove at the tower's base. The boat rocked against jagged stones, and Björn leapt out to secure a line. He grimaced as his fur boots sank into the frigid water. One by one, they disembarked, bracing themselves against the cold gusts that battered them. Moss and barnacles clung to the broken stone steps leading up to the tower door. A single iron torch sconce offered a dim, eerie flare. When Hakon tried the door, it groaned open far too easily, complaining of centuries of rust. The interior was dimly lit by a series of small braziers, their flames dancing in lurid greens and purples. At the center of the tower's lower chamber, they found a figure shrouded in a tattered cloak. The figure was stooped over, its back turned. Hakon raised his weapon, a battered sword, caution etched into every line of his posture. "Hail, stranger!" Hakon called. "We seek answers if you have them to give. Who are you?" Slowly the figure turned, revealing a face as pale as bleached bone. The old crone squinted. The greenish light distorted her features, making them appear drawn tight, like a skull stretched with sinew. She offered a rasping laugh. "Who am I? Have you not heard of me in your sagas, or have your people forgotten the old whispers?" Ingrid clutched her sword hilt, her heart stuttering in her chest. "We have learned many names on our journeys," she said, "some best left unspoken." The woman's eyes glinted with mischief. "Wise warrior maiden, you know the danger in uttering the name of the old powers? But no matter, call me the Watcher if you must call me anything." One of the men, Harald, lost his patience. We did not come here to exchange riddles. We are cursed, sailing forever in darkness. We need to know if you have a remedy." The crone's laughter crackled once more. She seemed genuinely amused. Curses are not so easily dispelled, nor are they cheaply undone. But your presence here, it is no accident. The gods, or another power, guided your prow to my tower. Sigurd, never one to shy from a direct confrontation, asked, "Do you know the source of our doom? A woman in a far village, chanting something that bound us to these black skies." "I do," she said softly, "and the powers answer to something much older than mortal tongues. She petitioned the deep powers of the sea and the sleepless realms, enshrouding you in penance for the blood you spilt. Did you expect your wanton raids would never cost you?" The men shifted uneasily, memories of ravaged villages gnawing at what remained of their conscience. Hakon swallowed his pride and confessed, "We thought ourselves chosen by the All-Father for plunder and glory. Yet we see now the toll is more than we bargained for." The Watcher's gaze bored into him. "Remorse alone is not enough. Yet redemption is a path still open if you survive." Hakon grit his teeth. "Name the path." He turned, beckoning them to follow. They climbed a spiraling stone stair that creaked and threatened to crumble under their boots. They reached a small chamber near the top of the tower where a large stone table stood. Upon its surface lay a tattered piece of parchment, lines swirling and weaving, forming a half-familiar map. In the center was a mark that resembled an island with a towering mountain. "There is a place," the Watcher began. "An isle that stands at the boundary between realms. My people called it Vitrium, the winter home, though it's gone by many names. At its peak is a temple, older than Midgard itself, a place where mortal and divine worlds overlap. If you can make the journey there, you may yet bargain with those powers that hold your curse." Hakon reached for the parchment, scanning its cryptic lines. "And how do we find this place in the darkness?" The crone pointed a bony finger at the chart. "This is not merely ink upon hide. It is a runic map that reveals itself when lit by the proper flame." She gestured to a brazier, the one glowing with purple fire. "Burn this scrap of bone in its flame before you embark." She picked up a small bone fragment etched with runes of unknown origin. "Then watch as the path glimmers upon the waves," Ingrid asked. "And the price for your aid?" The Watcher's grin revealed crooked teeth. "You still clutch your gold and silver from raids long past. Give me your wealth, for you can't spend it where you go. Greed is but an anchor dragging you deeper into the pit. Relinquish it, or leave." The men exchanged uneasy looks. By all logic, their gold was worthless out here. Yet parting with it felt like severing ties to a past that gave them identity. Finally, Hakon yanked off a gold band from his arm. He tossed it onto the stone table. The others followed suit, surrendering coins, jewelry, and goblets filched from temples. The relics clattered into a pile that gleamed in the eerie light. "Very well," said the Watcher. "Take the map, harness the flame, then sail north. They say the Star of the Great Bear would point you there if it were visible. Trust the runic glow to direct you. At Vedrum's peak, you must offer more than gold. Only through sacrifice of yourself and your regrets can the curse be reversed. Now go. The wind calls you." They wasted no time. Returning to their longship, they kindled a torch in the brazier's purple flame. Igniting the runic-etched bone, those runes flared to life with an otherworldly radiance. Hakon planted the torch near the mast, and the smoky swirl rose into the night. Gradually, luminescent lines formed along the water, faint ribbons stretching out across the waves, guiding them into the unknown. The men felt both awe and dread. Under Hakon's command, with Ingrid at the rudder, they followed the spectral path. Time lost meaning as they rowed. Gales battered them, rain slashed their faces, and thunder growled menacingly. But always, That shimmering thread guided them, weaving across a churning ocean blacker than the void. When they flagged, one of the crew would hum an old sea shanty, or Ingrid would bark an order. They had chosen this course, and would see it through. At last, a shadowy mass loomed on the horizon. Jagged cliffs rose from the sea, crowned with ice despite the swirling currents of brine below. Clouds hunched around the mountain's peak, lit from within by intermittent pulses of lightning. The air seemed colder, every breath a sharp sting in their lungs. The runic glimmer snaked up the rock face, winding its way toward the summit. The Vikings moored their ship against a craggy shelf that offered a precarious anchorage. One by one, they clambered onto the slippery rocks, hoisting weapons, ropes, flints, whatever gear might prove necessary. Only the bravest among them, or perhaps the most desperate, could face such a climb. Each man and woman understood they were entering a place where mortal footsteps were not welcome. With Hakon in the lead, they began their ascent, a slow, grueling slog across icy ledges. The wind howled like a chorus of spirits, and the unrelenting darkness remained, except for the occasional crack of lightning. Far below, the ocean frothed around the ship, threatening to tear it from its fragile moorings. They climbed for hours, though truly who could say how long? Their arms burned with every frozen handhold, and their breath turned to frost on their lips. Halfway to the summit, they encountered a wide ledge strewn with bones, human, animal, and perhaps stranger. The runic glow from their charmed torch revealed shapes scrawled across the stone, symbols of death and rebirth, of cunning gods and malevolent giants. The watchers on the ledge were ravens, black as the night, perched on outcroppings of rock, watching the intruders with unsettling intelligence. "Careful," Ingrid whispered. "The ravens of this place are not like the birds at home." One raven cawed, a sharp cry echoing off the cliff face, as if mocking them. Hakon forced himself to step forward. "We mean no insult," he said softly. "We come in search of pardon." In answer, the flock took flight, swirling overhead like a living black storm, their wings beating the air before vanishing into the swirling clouds above. The path remained. Glancing at each other, the Vikings resumed their climb, hearts pounding with a mix of relief and foreboding. At last they reached the summit, where the mountain's crowned plateau held a wide, circular clearing. In the center stood an ancient stone altar glowing with faint runes, similar to those on the map. The air thrummed with a power that set their nerves on edge, as though they stood at the intersection of countless voices whispering just beyond hearing. Hakon approached the altar first, inhaling the bite of ozone from distant lightning. He placed his hand on the stone, and a tremor seemed to run through his arm. The runes flared, illuminating all around. In that glow, shadows took shape, a swirling cloud of black that condensed into a figure draped in tattered robes. Its face was indistinct, shifting between male and female, old and young, a mosaic of possibilities. An otherworldly voice reverberated in the hush. "You who wear regret like a cloak," the being intoned. "Why have you come?" Hakon bowed his head. "We are bound by a curse. We come to plead for release. And what do you offer in exchange? The coin of mortals is worthless here." Hakon swallowed. "We offer what we were, and what we thought we would be. We offer our pride, our thirst for blood, our illusions of glory." The figure's voice turned curious. "Can you truly relinquish those things that shaped you? Will the raider forswear the next conquest? The warrior forswear the rush of war?" Ingrid lifted her chin. "We have paid enough. Our crew's souls remain in endless night. Give us the chance to find a new path." Lightning flashed and the figure drifted closer, circling the altar. "You raided a village protected by a seer. You spilled innocent blood. That wrath summoned ancient powers to banish you. There is a price in blood that must be paid." A hush fell. Then Hakon spoke, voice trembling with conviction. "Take mine. Take my life if you must. Let my crew be freed from the darkness." The men behind him stirred in alarm. Bjorn clutched Håkon's shoulder. "No," he hissed. "We stand as one. Your blood alone won't absolve us." He turned to the figure. "Take mine as well." Then Ingrid stepped forward, sword in hand. "And mine. We are in this together." The entire crew advanced, each offering their life in atonement for past sins. A deathly silence followed. The wind itself stilled. The figure studied them, the faint glimmer in its shifting eyes revealing neither mercy nor cruelty, merely an impassive tool of cosmic balance. Slowly, the being extended a hand. Life may fulfill the curse's demand, but your shared vow changes the shape of destiny. I can grant you a test, a final trial that may spare your captain's blood if your hearts prove pure. You must face the ghosts of your past deeds, endure them, or succumb. If you endure, the darkness will rend, and your rightful world shall return. Before any could ask the meaning, the figure dissolved into the swirling clouds. The stone altar split with a thunderous crack, revealing a staircase descending into blackness. The faint runic glow flickered around the entrance, inviting them below. Håkon felt a hand on his shoulder. Ingrid, eyes resolute. "We do this together," she reminded him. One by one, they descended. The steps opened into a cavern lit by swirling mists. Cold water dripped from stalactites, echoing in an otherwise suffocating silence. In the mist, figures materialized, each face etched with sorrow and anger. They were the specters of those the Vikings had slain, the mothers and fathers left destitute, the children orphaned by the raids. Men and women from unnumbered villages stepped forward, hands reaching, voices a chilling lament. Under this barrage of wounded spirits, each Viking confronted the imprint of their cruelty. Bjorn saw the face of the blacksmith he cut down. Sigurd beheld the farmer who had vainly tried to defend his home. Ingrid saw the terrified eyes of a young girl whose mother she had slain. The phantoms whispered of pain and heartbreak, their voices echoing in a chorus that weighed on the Vikings' hearts like anchors. Some of the men dropped to their knees, trembling under the weight of guilt. Håkon, though, held fast to the memory of why they came. He knelt, pressing his palms together. "I cannot undo what I have done," he said, voice unsteady. "We only ask for a chance to atone in this life. If you demand vengeance, take it." A figure, smaller than the rest, a child, approached him, ephemeral tears streaking its transparent face. Håkon felt his heart twist like broken sinew. The child reached out, placing a ghostly hand on his wrist. The contact felt colder than the northern snow. But in it, Håkon sensed not only anger, but a longing for peace that transcended fury. He bowed his head. The child drew back, merging again into the swirling mass of spirits. Slowly, the shapes drifted away, retreating deeper into the cavern until they dissolved into darkness. Though none of the Vikings spoke, each felt a shift, as if a fraction of the cosmic ledger had been wiped clean. With unspoken accord, they moved further into the winding cavern, uncertain if more trials awaited them. Then the path sloped up again. Their footsteps echoed, and more light seeped in. Soon they found themselves emerging onto a ledge on the mountain's far side. The wind still roared, and the horizon remained lost in darkness, but the air no longer felt suffocating. High overhead, clouds churned, shifting across the sky. Ingrid craned her head, eyes widening. A faint ribbon of illumination shimmered behind the roiling clouds, as though some celestial body was struggling to break through that endless night. The crew stumbled onto solid ground, raw amazement flickering in their exhausted faces. "We did as the figure demanded," Sigurd said, almost not daring to hope. "Is the darkness truly about to lift?" Håkon gazed at the horizon. "We mustn't lose faith now." A crashing peal of thunder silenced them. Lightning split the clouds, revealing the silhouette of that same robed figure perched on a boulder. When it spoke, its voice resonated like distant waves. You have accepted the weight of your deeds. The spirits received your remorse. Now witness the verdict." The being lifted both arms. The swirling storm clouds overhead churned, rotating faster, opening like a vortex. For a moment, all light vanished, leaving only the crackle of thunder. Then, with shocking suddenness, a brilliant shaft of gold tore through the blackness, igniting the world in dawn's glow. The Vikings gasped, dropping to one or both knees at the marvel. They had all but forgotten the fierce sweetness of sunlight. Its warmth caressed their faces, dissolving the numbness in their bones. The robed figure regarded them with something like grim satisfaction. "Your path is not without cost," it intoned. "You have glimpsed the monstrous consequences of your actions. If ever you betray this repentance, the curse shall return 100-fold." Hakon bowed his head. "We understand." The figure stretched an arm, and a sudden gust reversed, sweeping away the last vestiges of gloom. Slivers of sunlight glinted across the icy rock, revealing the way back to the seas below. Yet the figure did not vanish this time. It lowered itself to the ground, whispering words that made the runes on the Vikings' clothes glow dimly. "You are free to return and forge a new fate," the beam said softly, though its tone carried across the windswept mountaintop. "Go, and let the memory of the eternal night guide you to be more than murderers and thieves." Moments later, the robed presence dissolved, carried away on an eddy of swirling air. The Vikings remained kneeling, tears mingling with the sweat and grime on their faces. For the first time in unmeasured days, warmth bathed the world, and shadows lay across the ground in crisp outlines rather than endless darkness. They scrambled back down the mountain path, energy renewed by the promise of sun and hope. At the rocky shelf where their ship lay anchored, they found the sail shining brilliantly under newly risen sunlight. The men shielded their squinting eyes, dazzled by daylight. The black seas sparkled sapphire blue. The once distant horizon revealed a fringe of green land. None of them spoke as they boarded their longship, casting off ropes. With sure hands, they hoisted the sail. The wind, no longer an icy messenger of doom, filled the sail with robust force. The ship glided from the cursed isle, riding the currents with a smoothness none had experienced since the day they fled the doomed village. Standing at the prow, Hakon couldn't help but let a smile spread across his face. Behind him, the crew murmured in quiet awe. Bjorn pointed to seagulls circling overhead, cheering as if greeting long-lost friends. Ingrid whispered a prayer of thanks to the gods she once thought had abandoned them. Hakon lifted his sword, the battered blade held aloft in the crisp morning light. He spoke to all who were gathered behind him, voices hushed, hearts throbbing with joyful disbelief. "Brothers, sister, we have been granted a second chance. We must not spill blood without need. We owe our very freedom to the spirits we wronged and the vow we made." A ragged cheer arose, laced with tears of relief. Not all of them would be comfortable living as peaceful sailors. Some would yearn for the old thrill of conquest. But the memory of endless darkness, the wails of restless spirits, and the final absolution they'd witnessed would haunt them. It would guide them to choose their battles wisely and repay the debt left by their raids. As the ship turned toward the land that rose from the waves, whether it was their homeland or some unfamiliar shore, at least they knew it was bathed in sunlight. They were no longer doomed to wander the seas of eternal night. A new saga waited to be carved into the future. One no longer defined by violence and plunder, but by a hard-won understanding of the consequences that lurked behind every swing of the sword. Under Hakon's command, the longship glided boldly over the swelling waves. Rays of sunlight sparkled off the sea's surface, as if welcoming them back to life. In the distance, a swathe of coastline revealed itself, green meadows rolling up to distant hills. The men and women shook off the burden of centuries in darkness, forging toward that shore with hearts set on atonement. and perhaps building something new from the wreckage of their past. They did not look back at the looming peak they left behind, though it now stood haloed in the dawn's light. Some curses were meant to be endured, some trials to be overcome, but once they were conquered, the only path was forward. The sea, so long their prison, was once again their road, and on that bright horizon, the memories of the eternal night would guide them to kinder destinies. One wave at a time, they drew closer to whichever home they might be worthy of creating.